Thank you guys for having me. I love the name of this church, Victory. That's what we walk in today. We walk in victory today. That last song reminded me that I need to be just as desperate today for Christ in my life as I was when I was at my lowest. Just as desperate. I need to cry out to him just as much today because I'm still a mess. I am still a mess today, and I need that message of hope in my life. So I'm thankful to be here with you guys today. Again, my name is Chris Smith. I met Brother Wade. I don't know. It's been a while ago. It has. It's been a while ago, and we met again. And I just seen a fire, and I was like, man, I'm going to have to connect with this guy. I'm going to have to connect with this guy. I got out to his church here, and for me, I don't always test the. I don't want to try to connect with the heart. I don't. I want to test the spirit of the place. And the spirit of this place is holy, is righteous. And I said, I'm going to work with that. I'm going to work with that because I knew he had a passion for people. And so you guys are being led. Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. I believe you guys have got a great Paul with you. So thank you. Thank you for the work that you do here. And you guys. You know, I would say open up to Matthew chapter 8. That's been speaking to me, verse 1 through 27, specifically 23 through 27. And I'm going to share my story, but that's been speaking to me. So if you guys will, just whenever you can, right now while I'm talking, you can later. Doesn't matter to me. I may touch on it, I may not. I have no clue. I'm a faith-based coordinator for Northwest Tennessee. I work with congregations in 10 or 11 counties, and I recognize them as certified recovery congregations. Those individuals that help other individuals with mental health and substance use disorders. Those individuals that are returning back in their community, whether it be from a rehabilitation facility or prison or jail, doesn't matter. Those people who are willing not to be in outreach, but to reach in to their community and start digging into their community to help those people who are desperately in need. That's who I want to work with. That's who I partner with. That's who we recognize through the state, Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. I'm also just took a new position with the Governor's Office Advisory Council for reentry programming. And the beautiful thing about all this is these are all my experiences. I'm in recovery from a 20-year meth and opiate addiction. 20 plus. I'm also justice impacted. That means I've done several stints in prison. Matter of fact, I'm still on a 16-year sentence right now. Got about 8 years left of that, just walking it down. And let me tell you something, if you're doing good, you don't have to worry about any of that. You don't have to. I'll gladly go take a drug screen. Can't wait, excited about it because I know I'm going to pass it. So all these things, I became a personal trainer. You know, I co-owned a gym. I co-owned a restaurant. All these great things were happening to me, but they were still all external. All that stuff is irrelevant. The biggest thing for me and the thing that I battled in my life was identity. When I was 4-year-old, it was my very first memory. Very first memory in my whole life was at 4 years old. I got woke up by my mother and my father arguing late at night. And so I ran into the living room where they were arguing at, and my mother's crying, and I go up and I'm crying because they're yelling at one another, and she's looking at me and she's telling me to go back to bed. Everything's okay. And so I go back to the room and I'm just standing there by the doorway, scared to death, don't know what's going on. And they began arguing again, and it escalated and escalated. And I ran back in there crying. And my mama, she's scared to death, and I grab her leg, and I'm yelling at my dad. He tells me to be quiet. He's yelling at me, and my mother said, "Don't scream at my son like that." And he said, "Your son, well, you can have him." And what he did next was he walked to the end table. He picked his keys up, and he walked out the door, got in his car. He backed out of the driveway, and I didn't see him for years. Now, I didn't know what I was feeling. Had no clue. I just knew I was hurting. And come to find out, what I was experiencing was rejection. I'd been rejected by my father. And I carried that my whole life. We moved into to another town, and my mother eventually met another man, and we ended up moving in with him. And I didn't want to move, and where we moved at, it was just a really hard area, very poverty stricken, and drugs, violence, high crime, everything. And so this new guy that my mother had in her life, he threw parties every weekend, and so we were exposed to all that kind of stuff, and I just knew it wasn't right. I just knew it wasn't right. But they would always, and we lived in a, I should have brought some pictures of what I should have done. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, and there were 5 of us. So we slept on the floor. We slept on the floor, maybe the couch, sometimes the bed. We would take turns, and we were very poor. And I didn't understand as I got older why I had to wear the same shoes all year long. I didn't understand why I had to wear the same clothes. Like when I went back to school from Christmas break, everybody had new stuff, and I had the same stuff. When they went to school, at the beginning of the school year, they had new clothes. And I had hand-me-downs or used clothes. I didn't understand why my mother bought my shoes a size and a half too big and told me to keep them clean. And it angered me because I got bullied. I got bullied at school for the way that I dressed, for not having any money, for not looking the same. And I got into a lot of trouble as a child. And I got in a lot of fights, and the thing was, even when I was getting bullied and I took up for myself, I was still the one that got in trouble because of where I was from. And so, and mind you, I still haven't seen my father. And so I was still building up this anger. I was angry at my mother. I was angry at my father for leaving. I was angry at my mother for making him leave. I was angry that we had to live in this new place that was run down, that had a lot of crime, had a lot of drugs there. I was exposed to other people having sex, blah, blah, all this stuff. I was angry that I had to be in this environment. And I didn't know what else to do except lash out. And I didn't know what to do to fit in. Clueless. And so I was just angry and depressed and hurt and confused. 8 years old. 9 years old. Already lost. My stepfather was an alcoholic. every day he would come home from work and he would do the same thing. It would be the same routine. Make him a mixed drink, sit in the chair, read the paper, turn the little music on, and drink those drinks until he went to bed. Canadian Mist and Coke with 2 cubes of ice. And I watched him and I watched him and I watched him until one day I was like, I'm going to make him one of these drinks before he gets home. So I make the drink. Same thing. I knew where it was. It was always under the sink. And so I made him the drink right before he gets home. And I'm standing there when he comes through the door, and I hold the glass out, and he looks at me. He looks at the glass. He takes the glass. He takes a sip of it, and he says, "Perfect." For me, I did something right. For me, that's acceptance, and I want acceptance anywhere or anyhow I can get it. Any way that I can get it. I just need to be approved of. And so I kept making them drinks over the course of a few weeks and a few months. And then I got curious myself. So I made me one. Made me a little drink, same way. And I took a drink of it, and it was good. It was good. And so I kept making me drinks over time. 9-year-old, I took my first drink. And then my stepfather called on. I didn't know. I was just pouring water back into the Canadian Mist bottle. It was a 1-liter bottle, so I was just pouring a little water in it, not thinking anything. And then I hear him yell for me one day, and I knew I was in trouble. You know that voice. It doesn't matter. You know you're in trouble when they're screaming your name. And I went in there. I thought that was me. I said, I know I got that. But I went in there, and he's holding the bottle. And I knew I was in trouble. And guys, he beat the brakes off of me. Not because I've been drinking. No. Because I've been drinking his stuff. That's why he beat me. Because he's an alcoholic. Never mess with a person's stuff. And so I didn't drink anymore. Not his stuff. And I'll fast forward, and I'm going to get through some of this, okay, quickly. Like I said, everybody would come over, and there were 2 days. There were 2 days in our household that I felt like we were like family, where we would gather together. And one of those days would be when wrestling came on at night, and we'd have these little TV trays, and we'd all sit around and we'd watch wrestling, and it felt like a family. And the other day would be every Saturday when the Tennessee Vols play. We got any Vols fans in here? I'm just saying. Yeah, very little. Man, golly. We're going to be all right next year. Yeah, we're going to be all right next year. But we would sit around, and everybody, his friends and everybody would come over, and the women, they would cook something up, and of course the men would be drinking and whatnot, and just causing a ruckus. But we would all be around together watching football. And that was the only times that we were ever together. And I missed that. That's what I wanted. It felt like a family, even if it was dysfunctional. So anyways, my stepfather, he went to go make a run to the liquor store, beer store, and they were going to eat pizza that day, I remember. And his best friend was still there, and when everybody left, it was just him and I, and he called me into the bathroom. He was like, "Hey, still come here." And so I went into the bathroom, and he was like, "You can't tell anybody about this." And I was like, "Okay." And he was like, "Do you know what this is?" And there was some white substances on the sink, bathroom sink there. And I was like, "No." He said, "It's cocaine." He said, "You ever done it?" I was like, "No." He said, "I'm going to show you how to do it." So he rolled up that dollar bill, put it up his nose, hit that line, and then he gave it to me. And I did the same thing. And it was good. I liked it. I enjoyed it. So at 11 years old, I snorted my first line of cocaine. And I didn't do that often, just like I didn't drink often. But I remembered those feelings. I remember how I felt. Because the rest of the time, I felt miserable. I didn't want to get up and go to school and be made fun of and have to fight and then me get in trouble. I didn't know if I was going to be, I didn't know if I was going to be eating just a hot dog for supper that night and drinking the juice, the hot dog juice out of the corner of the packet before I throw it away. I'm just saying. That's how serious it was. I didn't know if our water was going to get cut off and I had to not run at PE the next day so I wouldn't smell. I didn't know. And I'm so angry. And those things, that drink, that cocaine, that felt good. It felt good. Time passes. His drinking gets greater. The fights come and they get bigger. My mother's infidelity. My stepfather drinking himself to death. Me skipping school. And they split up. Not long after that, he dies. And we're just living in this rundown house, and God bless her. She's trying, but she has her own issues, and she can't keep up with us. I have two other brothers, and in her marriage with my stepfather, I had another sibling, a sister. And so there's four of us. She's single. She doesn't know what to do. She's not keeping track of me. I drop out of school. And ended up getting into a lot of trouble at 15, where I almost beat a man to death when he found me with his wife. And I got sent off to Taft. It was a juvenile detention facility, like a juvenile prison. It's not open anymore. And here's the whole thing. Even when I came back, or even before I left, everybody's parents told the kids to stay away from me. I was bad news. I'm trouble. I felt like this outcast. And when I was getting into all this trouble, I never got reprimanded. I never got corrected. I never got disciplined. I wish I would have. It was like nobody cared about me. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anybody I could look up to. It was like nobody cared. And so I made a decision that day that if I was going to be this bad person that everybody thought I was, that I'm going to embrace it and I'm going to be the worst that I could possibly be. And that's what I did. Coming out of Taft, I got into some more trouble, and I had an opportunity or an option to go back to the place or get sent off to get my GED and some other stuff at a Job Corps in Crystal Springs, Mississippi, and I chose that. And when I come back home after that time right there, I was 17, about to turn 18. And When I turned 18, 3 months later, in December of 98, I was introduced to crystal meth. And when I tried that, it grabbed me. And it took me. It was good. I'm going to tell you what it did. Two things simultaneously. It gave me pleasure and it numbed the pain. And I didn't know what pain I was trying to numb. I just knew that I was in pain my whole life. And it done it for a long period of time. And then 1 week, I stayed up 4 days. In 1 week of using, I found myself in trouble. Caught a few felonies and ended up getting convicted of those and going to jail. And that's where all the rest of the other people that were called no good were. Problems were. So it was like a reunion for me. And I enjoyed it. I just wanted to be around people. I didn't care that if the thing that I was doing, I didn't care that the experiences that I had or the things that I were doing were bad if it put me around other people. I just wanted to be around other people because I was lonely. I just wanted to fit in somewhere. I was just trying to be accepted somewhere. And I'll fast forward this here. See, my addictions, and they weren't just that, they continued to build up. Because I just didn't have a drug addiction. I ended up being diagnosed with a mental health disorder. I had a sex addiction. I had a porn addiction. I had an eating disorder. I had all these things that I continued to look at, like I had options. Okay, this isn't working anymore. Let me go here, or let me mix these two, or let me mix these three. And it would lead me back to the same old feeling. It would lead me back to the place because it was all temporary and I was still miserable. But I'd rather be miserable in the thing that I was doing than not have that thing at all and have nothing. Be left with nothing. I would just rather be miserable. And 2 years later, again, 2 years later, I found myself in prison. My first prison sentence at Northwest. And it didn't change anything. Didn't change anything. And so over the course of that time right there, from 98 or 97 to 2017, it was the same thing over and over and over. And this is how my disease or my addictions progressed. It progressed in time. 2 year sentence, 3 year sentence, 5 year sentence, 8 year sentence, and now this 16 that I'm on. And again, mental health diagnosis, 7 treatment centers, 6 kids by 4 different women, just irresponsible all over the place. All over the place. Trying. I would look for a good woman to bear a child with because I wanted kids, but I knew I wasn't going to be responsible enough. And I was looking for women who were in the church that had a great solid family, and that even though I wasn't going to be there, that they would still be raised up in a church around the family. How sick is that? How sick is that? Just looking for an identity, carrying this rejection. And when I got this 16-year sentence, I've been locked up for 3 years fighting this sentence. I had tried my hand at drug dealing, over the course of 15 years, and I was terrible at it. I was awful, except this last time where I met a woman, and she was a nurse, and she worked in the OR as a scrub-in, and she really had never been into trouble or anything, and she allowed me to stay there. I had just got out of flattening an 8-year sentence, and I was going to try to get it right. I was with this other woman, and I was going to try to get it right, and all I could do was just stay in the house because I was so afraid of the world, and I did not want any ties to it. I did not want to be connected to the same things, but all I did was stay isolated, and that isolation brought frustration, and when I became frustrated, I knew I needed to get out. And when I got out, I left the woman that I was with and my 2 kids. And I never came back, and I met this other woman. And she was getting high, and we were laying in bed, and I remember as I was getting high, I started staring out into the just outer space, really. And she said, "What are you thinking about?" And I said, "I think I'm going to sell this." And she started laughing because she knows me. She's like, "You can't sell this. You can't ever sell. You've never sold anything." And I said, "This is all I got. This is it." So me and a buddy teamed up, and 3 months later, literally 3 months later, I've made about $80,000. And in that next year, I made multiple 6 figures, and I don't know what I'm doing. I have no clue. I'm all over several different states. The police are watching me. The DEA is watching me. The TBI is watching me. And I get in trouble. Blessed, really, because the Drug Task Force had interrupted a federal investigation on me without allowing the judge to know that there was a federal investigation. So it could have been a lot worse, but they continued to investigate my buddy, and he's in federal prison for about 48 more months, I believe, on kingpin charges. And I could be right there. But I did get a 16-year sentence. And I was okay with it. And I was sitting there on my bunk. Watching TV. And my buddy comes in and he sits down. A little silence goes by, and then he breaks the silence with this. He said, "Man, Smitty, man," he said, "I'm so tired of this life." He says, "I'm about to change my life." And so I start thinking about there's time, because there were times that I tried to change. There were times when I really felt like a change had happened, and then I come back to my community and there's nothing that's changed in my community except the gas prices. That's it. And I'm not going to be accepted, and I'm not going to be given a shot. I'm still seen as this outcast. I'm still seen as this misfit. I'm still seen as trouble and being a problem, and nobody wants to come close to giving me a job. Or even giving me a ride, anything. I felt like I could only help myself so far. And I needed people in my life. And I just didn't have it. And so I would give up. And when people say, "Why do you give up so easy?" I promise you I was not giving up so easy. It's just so much harder when people place these labels on you and they think that you're infectious or you're contagious. Your past is going to rub off on them. I tried. I just wasn't built up that much to hold on to that change. And so when he said that, I started laughing at him and I said, good luck. Good luck, buddy. I said, because this is it. Don't you understand? This is all we got. And I don't want this taken away from me, because then I have nothing. Nothing. And I'd rather be miserable with something than just be like this with nothing. So he got out a year and a half before I did. Didn't hear about him or anything like that. And then I got out, and the girl that I got in trouble with me, she had a job at a restaurant, and she got me a job washing dishes there. I won't ever forget it. And I was making $50 a day. I was making $50 every 5 minutes. And so I was not grateful for that job. I was pissed. I was upset. I was having to scrape other people's eaten food off of a plate. I was having to wash these dishes with this steam rising up my face, with my hands wrinkly, and stand over this sink for 8 hours for $50. And I said, this is not it. So after 1 week of being out on a fresh 16, I go back to using. 2 weeks later, I happened to see my buddy I was in prison with. And when he walked up to me, I already knew something was different about him. I could see it. I could see it in his mannerism. I could see it in the way he walked, how he was carrying himself. And when he came up to me, he was smiling. And I said, Johnny? He said, yeah. He said, I told you. He said, I told you I was going to change. And I said, I know you have. What did you do? What did you do? And he told me what he did. When I'd seen him, I was in the middle of a 3-day high, so I'm still through the roof. But a seed had been planted. And then he kept calling my girlfriend over the course of the next week and a half. Not to see how good I was doing, just to see how bad it had gotten. Because it always goes like this. And with me, I'm going to run it till the wheels fall off of it. I'm going to spiral all the way out of control. I mean, I'm going to destroy everything before I stop. Everything. But not this time. I had missed 2 PO meetings because they had called me in for a drug screen. I went in and I took my drug screen. I passed my drug screen. And then they called me 2 days later and said they pulled a random drug screen for me to come back in. So I was like, that's odd. But I went in. I didn't want to make a fuss about it. Went in and I took that drug screen and I passed it. And they called me 2 days later and said, hey, come back in. And I was like, they know. They know. And so I didn't go. And I tried to reschedule, and they gave me a reschedule for the next day, and I didn't go. And I wouldn't answer my phone, and they called my girlfriend's phone, and my girlfriend is my wife now. And so I'm just going to say wife from here on out. They called my wife, and they said, boy, he's a hard one. He said, if he don't come in tomorrow, we're going to violate him. And so I'm sitting there, and she tells me this And I'm sitting there trying to come up with a plan, trying to come up with something. All I could come up with was like let me call them before they open and say that I can't make it that day. I've got 10 hours to be there. But I already know that I'm not going to make it for the whole day because I can't get a ride. And that's what I do. But I'm sitting there because I know that's not going to work. Excuse me. I know that's not going to work, and I'm laying in bed, coming down off a 5-day high, thinking of something else. Thinking of where I can go, what I can do, how long I can run. And I'm just staring at the ceiling fan. And I do something that I haven't done. 3 words. God help me. I used to make fun of all those people that were in the corner of the jail or at the treatment center when all they would be like is God, 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 stop. Or in prison when they had the Jesus corner, what they called it. And here I am, in all my sincerity, with those 3 words, calling out to God. 5 minutes later, there was a tap on my window. It's 5 a.m. 5 minutes later, there's a tap on my window, and it's my buddy. And he says, Smitty, it's Johnny. Come to the front door. So I go to the front door, open the front door, and we're looking at one another. And he said, man, I came just in time, didn't I? I said, you sure did, brother. I need help. And he said, well, let's get some. So we sat in my living room for a few hours, calling and talking to the same administrator at the same place that he went to. And they said they had a bed for me in 3 weeks. And I said, I don't got 3 weeks. I don't got 3 weeks. They said, well, we'll call you back. Let me see what we can do. We'll call you back. I said, okay. So they called back like an hour later, and they were like, 3 days. We can get you in 3 days. I said, okay, yeah, perfect. Great. That'll give me time to whatever I want to do for the rest of the time. Tell my PO I got a drug problem. And then I sat there for about an hour, and I was like, I'll never go. I'll never go. And so I called them back and I said, I don't have 3 days. I've got to come today. I've got to come today or I'm not going to show up. I know me. So they said, let me see what we can do. And then they called me back an hour and a half later and said, can you be here tonight? And I said, yeah. And so, packed up my wife and her stepdaughter, drove me a few hours down to Columbia, Tennessee, to a facility that was called A Place of Hope. And I needed a place of hope in my life. And I went in there at midnight to change my life. Who knows? Who knows, right? Because this is my 7th treatment center. This is the 7th one. What's going to be any different? So anyways, it's a 4-month program. They have halfway and all that other stuff. And I was there for 2 months, almost 2.5 months. And I was just going through the motions. Here's the whole thing. If you tell me what to do, I can do it. If you give me responsibility and oversee it, I'm going to knock it out. I learned great structure in jail, in prison, and in rehabs. But I never had that outside. I never knew how to set that up for myself outside. I was so irresponsible. And then I would be overwhelmed with those responsibilities that I would just go look for some relief. Same thing. Go look for some relief. So anyways, they had a tent revival. They have a 2-week tent revival every year, and they bring different pastors from different towns around the Nashville area. And we're sitting there, and again, I'm just going through the motions, and I like to write, and we're sitting there on the first night, and the pastor comes in, and he gives his sermon. They sing some songs, they do an altar call or whatever, and I'm not paying any attention, and it's over, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'm writing in my journal, and I hear somebody say, hey, you. I'm not talking to you. You can go. Got her. And he said, hey, you writing in that book? And I look up, and he said, yeah, you, and it's the pastor. He said, he said, man, you mind coming down here? God's put something on my heart to share with you. I'd like to share that with you and then pray over you. And I was like, okay, sure. So I go down there, and he prays over me what God put on his heart to share with me. And it was over, and he was like, God bless you. And I was like, God bless you too, whatever, and go about my night. Slept good that night. Night 2, different pastor from a different town comes in, and same thing. They sing some songs. He preaches a word, and they do this altar call and all this other jazz, and it's over, and then they do a little meet and greet, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'm writing. And he said, and I hear somebody say, hey, you writing? And I look up, and it's the pastor. And he said, yeah, you. He said, man, God has put something on my heart to share with you, and I'd like to share that with you and then pray over you if you don't mind. I just thought they were trying to convert me. So for me, I'm the guy that's always in the corner watching everybody to see what their angle is, see what their ulterior motive. You can say hi to me and have a mannerism, and I'm trying to figure out what you're trying to get from me. And so I'm like, this is odd. So I go down there, and he proceeds to pray over me and share with me what God put on his heart to share with me. And it was the exact same thing that the pastor the night before had shared with me. And it kept me up. It kept me up. And I was just thinking about it. There's no way they had to talk, They had to talk. They're from 2 different places. Anyways, night 3, I didn't bring my book. There was another pastor with a different congregation that came in, and they did the same thing. And I watched the pastor the whole night. I don't know what he preached about, clueless. I'm just watching him. And so he preaches his sermon, they do an altar call, and then they do that little, meet and greet hugging after it's over and all that stuff. And I'm watching him. Every person that he goes to, every move that he makes, I'm watching him. And he leans in to hug this fella, and he's smiling. And I'm watching him, and he opens his eyes, and we lock eyes. And his smile goes away, and he lets loose of the fella he was hugging. And he just starts staring at me. And then he put his head down. And all I'm thinking is, please don't call me. Please. I'm already crying. And what seemed like an eternity of 10 seconds, he lifts his head up, he looks at me, points at me, and says, you. By that time, I'm snot crying. And I run up there. I run up there. Because I know. And that's what I said. I said, I know what you're about to say. I know what you're about to say. And he said, you do? I said, yeah. I said, God's put something on your heart to share with me. You want to share that with me and pray over me? He said, that's right, son. He said, you mind if I do that? I said, yes. And he proceeded to pray over me and share with me the exact same thing that those two other pastors from those two other different towns shared with me those 2 nights prior. And that broke me. That broke me. I went outside that night, outside of the tent, and it was a clear night. I won't never forget it, and it never gets old. It was my desperation moment, and that's why I said we need to be just as desperate today as we were in that mode of desperation we were in when we needed him the most. Because we need him just as bad today, right now, for our next breath, for our next word, for our next step. We're just as desperate for him today as we are at our low. And I went outside, and it was a beautiful night. I couldn't tell you what day it was. I just know it was that day. I could see as I looked at the grass, plain as day, stretched toward the heavens. I could look at the trees and see the limbs arching towards its creator. I could see that the stars were leaned in a little bit closer to the heavens. And I understood right then that everything that had been created understood who created it. He makes the rocks and the trees cry out. And I hit my knees. I hit my knees that day. And I said, I understand. And I accepted Christ into my life. I was a guy that had no identity, searching for one, searching for an identity my whole life. And I found the one that knew me before I was even formed in the womb. I found the one that says, you have purpose for your life. I found the one that gave me an identity. And I let everything else go. Literally let everything else go. And when I did that, I got up, walked straight to the executive director's office, and told him, I said, Brother Mike, I said, I know this is a 4-month program. I said, but I got some work to do. I got some work to do, and I can't leave here in a month and a half. I won't make it. I need to stay here. He said, stay as long as you like. I said, that's all I need to hear. Next thing I did, I called home. I called my wife. She thinks I'm getting out in a month and a half. And I said, hey, I'm not coming home. She said, when you coming home? I said, I don't know. Just when I know that I know that I know. And then I called my kids and told them the same thing. And I told them both that they couldn't even come up there and see me anymore See, I didn't want to be compelled or moved to leave that place until I knew that God was done with me in that particular space of my life. And so I did not need to be emotionally drawn out because I'm impulsive. I allow my feelings to dictate my behavior. And I wasn't going to allow feelings to run me out of a place where I'm supposed to be planted and growing. So I stayed 2 years. I stayed 2 years at that place. I ended up working at that place. I ended up going to college from that place. I ended up getting my degree from that place. I ended up getting my license. I'd never had a license my whole life. That was probably a bigger deal than anything. I ended up becoming a manager at a pizza place. It was the biggest deal for me. It was the biggest deal when they dropped those keys into my hand and I said, why me? And that regional manager said, because I trust you. I ain't never heard that before. Wow. And I got that place from 17 out of 24 restaurants in that region to the third most productive restaurant in that region in 7 months. Attitude and experience. And here's the whole thing. That place I worked at was a little over 2 miles away. I walked there every day and walked home. I got to a place where I started running there and running home. And the reason I ran was because when all this stuff took place, I went into my room and I had a whiteboard in my room and I said, okay. I need to write down everything that is connected to me. Every avenue or area of my life that I can think of, write it down. And I began writing. See, because I wanted to be better all over. Every aspect, every area, every facet of life. I wanted to improve. I wanted to be better. I wanted to be great there. And I wrote it all down, and I had to ask myself, am I fit or am I unfit here? Am I healthy or am I unhealthy in these areas? Is it good here or is it in shambles? And it was all in shambles, every bit of it. And I said, okay, God, here we are. Here we are. What do I need to do right now? Right now. And his response immediately was run. And I was like, run? Like, know ye not that they which run in a race run all? So run, like spiritually run? No, he was like, run physically. Put your shoes on, get up and run. I've been so good at running from everything that I had to be good at physically running. And they had a track, so I did. I got up and I ran. And I was unhealthy, guys. I was still smoking cigarettes, 2 packs a day almost, and eating bad, just unhealthy, staying up late, getting up early, forced to get up early, just tired. And I ran a quarter mile. It was all that I had, but I ran it. And my shins hurt, my side hurt, just from that little old quarter mile. And I went to bed that night. I slept well. God woke me up that next morning, 5 a.m. First thing he said was, run. It's like, run? God. I was like, my feet hurt. My shins are hurting. I was like, I ain't wanting to run. Run. I said, okay. So I put my shoes back on, laced them tight, got up, went outside that morning, and I ran again. Quarter mile. And in the process of that run, man, I was hurting. I was hurting. I was hurting even more. My feet, I wanted to stop, but I didn't. And as I approached the finish line of that little run right there, God said, your progress from here out is going to be painful. But you're going to have to get up every day and keep running. You are going to have to run through it. You're not going to feel like it. It's going to hurt. It's going to be difficult. But you keep running. So what that told me was, in all those areas of my life, I was going to have to dig through that stuff. And it was going to be painful. There were things that I did not want to relive or revisit, but I had to in order to progress, move forward in my life. And the difference is, though, was that I was willing to relive that pain in order to move forward. I had nothing else. When I called on God, He answered me. When I found an identity, I was changed. I could at least give my best effort. And that's what I did. 3 months later, I'm running 5 miles a day. I quit smoking the cigarettes. I started eating better. I started sleeping even better. And even in sleeping even better and getting up earlier, I had more energy. And when I had more energy, I had more focus. And when I had more focus, I could really study to show myself approved into that word and dive in that thing. I didn't want to be half-hearted. I didn't want to give a half measure. I wanted to go all in on every facet of my life. And I wanted to be the best that I could possibly be in every area of my life. I wasn't going to look to the left. I wasn't going to look to the right. I'm not concerned about your opinions. I don't care what they got to say about it. I don't care if you think I'm limited in my resources. I got a resource that's greater than any resource in this world. And if He says that we're going to get through it, then I'm going to believe Him. I'm going to believe Him. I just need to do my part. And I'm going to do my part, and that's why Matthew 8 speaks to me. In the storm, when they were in the storm, verse 18, Jesus said, commanded them to the other side, and they got into the boat to go to the other side, and then the storm hit. And they panicked, and they were taking in water, and they woke Jesus up. Jesus had been busy in chapter 8, healing Peter's mother-in-law, the centurion's servant, the other crowds, the leper. And they hopped in the boat because the crowds were coming down and swarming upon him, and He commanded them to get to the other side because He had some more work to do over there. And a storm came, and they panicked, and they woke Him up. And He looked at them, and He says, ye of little faith. And He turned, and He rebuked the storm and told it to be still. And this is my perspective. I don't want to be somebody that has a little faith. Even though they said it's a faith of a mustard seed. But I don't want to be the person that's always holding the mustard seed and using that faith and throwing that mustard seed away and grabbing another one. I want my mustard seed faith to keep growing. I want it to keep growing. And so He chides them, ye of little faith, you could have did this. You could have told that storm to be still. For me, because they're in the same boat with the same water in the same day, I knew that I was going to have a lot of issues. I knew that I was going to have a lot of problems to fix. I knew there were going to be a lot of things that life was going to pour on me. And the way that I think about them could cause chaos, or I could have peace about it. Because the enemy was going to try to throw everything he could at me to get me back to that place of bondage. And I wasn't going to allow it. So every day when I get up, every single day, I've only missed 7 times in the last 7 years. And I'm about to close this out. Every morning when I get up, I go look myself in the mirror and I say, I'm going to fight you today. I'm going to fight you today because I'm the only person that's going to hold me back. I'm going to be my biggest enemy or my biggest ally. It's what I say about me, not what these other people say about me. Doesn't matter. I knew I was still going to have storms come along to try to cause chaos in my life. The word says, when the whirlwind passes by, the wicked are no more, but the righteous have an everlasting foundation. See, I had an identity. I have a foundation. That's what I'm building on today. That's what I'm going to continue to grow in today. So I'm not going to keep speaking about the storms in my life. I'm going to start speaking to the storms in my life. Be still. He promised we were going to get to the other side. And that's what I stand on today. Again, yeah, I work for the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. I took an advisory council position with the governor's office. I've co-owned a restaurant and co-owned a gym. I'm debt-free. I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm a personal trainer. And we're still scratching the surface. I want to be used up when I leave this earth. Doesn't mean I don't mess it up. Doesn't mean that I don't get inside my head. Doesn't mean I'm not going to make mistakes. It just means that if I do fall down, I'm just going to get right back up and keep fighting. Because I know I have purpose today. And somebody helped me. Somebody helped me. It changed my life. And now I'm going to help others do the same thing. I'm so grateful for that opportunity today. And we're not limited. We are not limited by our past. All our experiences, all that is power. All that is a treasure trove of experiences to help somebody else, and they need to hear them. If your story, if our testimonies were not powerful, it would not be in the same sentences, we overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimonies. That's how powerful our experiences are. And we do not need to be ashamed. There is therefore now no condemnation. Somebody else may, but they're irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Be an open book. Share your story. We have impact and influence over people we don't even know are watching our lives. What are we revealing to those individuals? How are we influencing and impacting them? Matter of fact, real quick, over the course of our life, we will impact up to 80,000 people in our lives. It's crazy to think. The trucker that's had his blinker on, and we're about to pass him, and then we slow down and let him in. We'll never meet him. or we don't, and we go by him. We still influence and impact him. How are we impacting and influencing individuals today? Because every part of our life can be improved. And people need to see us struggle in those areas where we're trying to improve. And they need to see what the struggle looks like, but they also need to see what it looks like when you struggle and not give up. Every area of our life. Every area of our life. Every facet of our life is God's. Then we need to be practicing to our utmost potential. Period. Guys, it's been since July 20th to 2017, and I never thought I would be here. I never thought I would have an identity. I never thought my life would be good. But here we are. If there's something that you're struggling with today, quit speaking about it and start speaking to it. And I know there's something that you're struggling with today, because I am too. We all do. That's why we need us. This thing don't work without us. We need us. And we need to develop our relationships with one another, building on our faith, not just individually, but collectively. Collectively. We need each other. Relationship. I'm so grateful to be here with you guys, man, and I thank you for being patient with me. I don't know how much time I took. I was going to try to keep it to like 40 minutes. 40 minutes, and I wanted to preach, but then I said, let me not do that. That'll be another 40 minutes, and I'm hungry. But thank you guys. I want you guys to know that whatever it is, whatever you were assigned to do, you were designed to do. Period. Remember that and take that step towards it. Thank you guys.